260 BCE, at the Battle of Changping, the state of Qin executed nearly 500,000 prisoners, including children. Its legal code, uncompromising and absolute, dictated that a farmer failing to plant enough crops or a soldier not collecting sufficient enemy heads could face harsh corporal punishment, forced labor, or even death. This was a state, once dismissed as a peripheral, barbarian entity, that would in just 15 years overwhelm its more culturally advanced rivals and unify a continent. How could such a system of total control and absolute ruthlessness not only endure, but conquer so completely? Welcome back to the History Atlas. Today, we unravel how the state of Qin, through its uncompromising adoption of legalism, forged an empire from a war-torn land, forever changing the course of Chinese history. By the 5th century BCE, the stability of ancient China's Zhou dynasty had collapsed. The nominal authority of the Zhou kings had long been an echo, their mandate of heaven, a forgotten whisper on the winds of conflict. What began as a gradual fracturing during the spring and autumn period escalated into outright anarchy by 475 BCE, ushering in the brutal era of the Warring States. This epoch was defined by incessant, industrialized conflict, not noble duels or localized skirmishes. Instead, it brought large-scale, brutal attrition, fueled by innovations in metallurgy, particularly iron weaponry, sophisticated siege engines, and the chilling advent of mass conscription. Armies numbering hundreds of thousands clashed. Entire populations faced extermination. State survival hinged on ruthless efficiency. In this brutal reality, the time-honored principles of the Zhou, the elaborate rituals, the appeals to moral governance espoused by Confucius, proved tragically insufficient. How could ritual pacify a warlord intent on conquest? How could moral suasion stem the tide of invading armies and protect borders? The old orders had utterly failed. This desperate reality spurred an unprecedented intellectual ferment, the 100 schools of thought. While Confucianism, Taoism, and Mohism offered distinct visions for peace or order, a stark pragmatism took root, driven by the absolute necessity for state strengthening. Amidst this chaos, on the rugged western frontier, lay the state of Qin. Often dismissed by its more civilized eastern neighbors as semi-barbaric, Qin's peripheral status became its greatest asset. Unburdened by the rigid traditions and entrenched aristocratic interests of the central states, Qin was uniquely open to radical, uncompromising change. For its rulers, survival was an existential imperative, demanding a system that could guarantee not just existence, but undisputed dominance. By the mid-4th century BCE, Qin remained a peripheral power. Yet, within its rugged frontiers lay a fierce ambition for survival in the brutal Warring States era. This drove Duke Shao of Qin, in 361 BCE, to issue his famous Order to Seek Guests, Chu Xian Lane. This decree actively invited talented individuals from across the fragmented realm to contribute to Qin's strengthening, regardless of their origin. This audacious call, born of necessity, ushered in the most transformative figure in Qin history, Shang Yang. Shang Yang, a member of lesser nobility from the state of Wei, arrived in Qin with a brilliant strategic mind and an uncompromising vision for statecraft, drawing upon the pragmatic ideas of thinkers like Li Kui and Wu Qi. He viewed the traditional Zhou feudal system, with its entrenched aristocratic power and fragmented authority, as a fatal weakness inhibiting the state's survival. Shang Yang saw the state's ills as requiring radical, decisive intervention. His initial reforms, enacted in 356 BCE, were radical. He standardized weights, measures, and land ownership, creating a uniform basis for state control. He abolished old feudal domains, replacing them with centrally administered prefectures and counties, Zhenxianji, directly accountable to the Qin court. A rigorous household registration system was implemented, providing the state with an accurate accounting of its populace for conscription and taxation. Crucially, promotion within Qin's administration and military became based solely on merit and state service, not birthright, systematically dismantling the aristocracy's traditional hold on power. Furthermore, the mutual responsibility system, Lian Zuo Fa, grouped households into units of 5 or 10, making them collectively accountable for each other's crimes, a potent tool for social control. Even primogeniture was abolished, encouraging the division of large families to expand the tax base. Predictably, such radical changes faced fierce opposition from conservative elements, including members of the ducal house. Shang Yang, however, enforced his laws with absolute impartiality, famously punishing even the crown prince's tutor for a minor infraction, demonstrating that the new law applied to all without exception. This unflinching application of justice broke the traditional influence of the old nobility. The second wave of reforms in 350 BCE further solidified this new order, notably through the privatization of land ownership, which incentivized agricultural production and increased the state's tax revenue. Above all, the severity and impartiality of these new laws served one overarching objective: to enrich the state and strengthen the army. Fu Guo Chang Bang. Through Shang Yang's transformative policies, Qin was systematically re-engineered, channeling every societal energy into the singular pursuit of state power, agricultural output, and military might, making it the first truly legalist state in China. The transformation of Qin was no accident of geography or martial spirit. It was the deliberate work of intellects who forged an unyielding philosophy and rulers who possessed the will to implement it. At the heart of this formidable project stood Duke Shao of Qin, whose desperation spurred him to issue the order to seek guests in 361 BCE. His unwavering resolve provided the indispensable foundation for legalism's ascendancy. Into this new order stepped Shang Yang, a brilliant, albeit ruthless, intellect whose reforms laid the foundational blueprint for the Qin state. He championed the principles of Fa, law, Shu, administrative methods, and Shi, legitimacy of power, systematically dismantling old feudal structures, imposing impartial laws on all, promoting solely on merit, and focusing all societal energy on agriculture and warfare. Centuries later, the ultimate executor of these principles emerged in King Zheng, who would become Qin Shi Huang. His ruthless pragmatism, boundless ambition, and singular determination to unify all under heaven found its perfect vehicle in the legalist system. He wielded its tools with an unflinching hand, demonstrating that the abstract tenets conceived by thinkers could be brought to devastatingly effective fruition. He was aided by figures like Li Si, his prime minister. A student of the Confucian philosopher Xunji, Li Si uniquely recognized the necessity of laws alongside morality. He became a key ideologue and implementer of total state control, driving uniformity across the nascent empire and orchestrating the infamous burning of books and burying of scholars to eradicate dissenting thought. The most sophisticated theoretical codifier of legalism was Han Fei. Though he never directly served Qin and was executed there, his writings synthesized and perfected the legalist emphasis on law, method, and power, profoundly influencing Li Si and generations of Chinese rulers. Han Fei articulated that the ruler's authority, Shi, must be absolute and unquestioned, enforced through strict, publicly known laws, Fa, and managed by an efficient, impersonal bureaucracy operating through transparent methods, Shu. At its core, legalism posited a deeply pessimistic view of human nature. It believed individuals were inherently selfish, motivated solely by reward and punishment. Moral persuasion, so central to Confucianism, was deemed useless. Therefore, governance by fa, strict, universally applied, and impartial laws, was paramount, contrasting sharply with the Confucian ideal of rule by ritual and moral example. Legalism championed centralization, with all power flowing from the ruler, and promoted collective responsibility, often holding entire families or communities accountable for individual transgressions. It recognized only two truly productive activities, agriculture and war, viewing all other pursuits, such as scholarship, commerce, or the arts, as parasitic distractions to state strength. These abstract ideas were not mere philosophy. They were the concrete policy instruments that shaped Qin's character, transforming it into an efficient, relentless engine of conquest, utterly unburdened by tradition or sentiment. The death of Shang Yang, though ironic, executed by the very laws he helped establish, did not end legalism in Qin. Instead, his radical reforms were not only maintained but rigorously strengthened by successive rulers, most notably King Huiwen and King Zhaoshan. This continuity ensured Qin's transformation became deeply ingrained, creating an engine of state power unmatched by its neighbors. The economic strength forged by these reforms proved foundational. Land privatization continued to incentivize farmers to maximize output, systematically filling Qin's granaries and tax coffers. Massive labor mobilization, exemplified by engineering marvels such as the Duzhongyan irrigation project in Sichuan, boosted agricultural yields in crucial regions and harnessed a vast workforce for infrastructure vital to military campaigns. This unprecedented resource base provided the financial and human capital necessary for sustained warfare. From this robust economic foundation, Qin refined a military machine of terrifying efficiency. The merit-based promotion system, directly linking a soldier's advancement and wealth to his battlefield performance and the number of enemy heads collected, coupled with mass conscription, forged a loyal, well-drilled peasant army. Qin's logistical superiority allowed it to sustain large forces far from its borders, while its command structure ensured rapid deployment and tactical coherence. Innovations, including the strategic use of cavalry and combined arms tactics, further sharpened its lethal edge, making its armies virtually unstoppable. The culmination of this century, long application of legalist principles, was King Zheng's relentless march toward unification. Between 230 and 221 BCE, in a mere 9 years, Qin systematically conquered its rivals. Han in 230 BCE, Zhao in 228 BCE, Wei in 225 BCE, Chu in 223 BCE, Yan in 222 BCE, and finally Qi in 221 BCE. This breathtaking speed and scale of conquest were a direct consequence of Qin's legalist, engineered efficiency and resourcefulness. Decades prior, the Battle of Changping in 260 BCE, where Qin forces famously annihilated 450,000 Zhao soldiers, served as a chilling precursor, demonstrating Qin's uncompromising brutality and military effectiveness on an unprecedented scale. The psychological impact on the other warring states was profound. Confronted by Qin's singular, unyielding focus on enriching the state and strengthening the army, their traditional, often fragmented, political and military structures proved incapable of mounting a coherent defense. They were paralyzed, unable to adapt their own systems or unite effectively against a force that systematically dismantled them, one by one. The path to unification, for Qin, became an almost inevitable march, paved by the cold, calculating logic of legalism. The relentless march of Qin, fueled by its legalist engine, reached its inevitable climax in 221 BCE with the conquest of Qi, the last of the independent states. This was more than a military triumph. It was the ultimate, brutal validation of legalist principles, marking a profound and irrevocable rupture with 2 millennia of traditional Chinese political order. The warring states period was over, extinguished not by reconciliation, but by absolute subjugation under a singular, uncompromising will. The architect of this unified realm, King Zheng, discarded the ancient title of king, proclaiming himself Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. This was not an act of vanity, but a profound ideological statement. It signified a divine mandate that superseded all previous claims, establishing an authority unparalleled in human history, rooted not in ritual propriety or moral suasion, but in raw, consolidated power. With unification achieved, the legalist framework, honed over generations within the Qin state, was ruthlessly applied across the nascent empire. Feudalism, the bedrock of the Zhou order, was systematically abolished, its regional powers dismantled. In its place, a centralized imperial system was imposed, dividing the vast territory into commanderies and prefectures, all administered by centrally appointed officials loyal solely to the emperor. This ensured direct control from the capital, eliminating any vestiges of independent authority. The first emperor then embarked on an unprecedented campaign of standardization, solidifying legalism's grip. Currency, weights, measures, and even the axle widths of carts were made uniform, facilitating trade, taxation, and military movement. A common written script was enforced, binding diverse regions ideologically. Vast networks of roads and canals were constructed, not merely for economic benefit, but primarily to ensure rapid troop deployment and efficient administrative oversight. Monumental public works, such as sections of the Great Wall and the Emperor's colossal tomb guarded by the Terracotta Army, mobilized millions of laborers, demonstrating the state's absolute command over its population and resources, channeling all energy toward imperial might. Perhaps the most telling expression of legalism's triumph was the burning of books and burying of scholars in 213–212 BCE. This act of intellectual suppression, orchestrated largely by Prime Minister Li Si, aimed to eradicate all dissenting thought, especially the humanistic ideals of Confucianism, which challenged the emperor's absolute authority with notions of moral governance and the people's welfare. The state tolerated no competition for loyalty, no independent critique. In Qin's unified empire, there was only one truth, and it flowed from the emperor, enforced by the law. This degree of centralization, control, and ideological uniformity was unprecedented, a stark testament to the sheer transformative power of legalism. The unification of China under the Qin dynasty was a monumental achievement, an unprecedented act of state building driven by the uncompromising tenets of legalism. Yet, the very system designed for ultimate stability and strength ultimately led to its rapid dissolution. Scarcely 15 years after its triumphant consolidation in 221 BCE, the empire crumbled, a stark testament to the internal contradictions of governance solely by fear and force. The first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, exercised absolute power, enforced by a vast, centrally appointed bureaucracy and a brutal legal code that permeated every aspect of life. Uniformity was ruthlessly imposed, from currency and weights to axle widths and written script. Every element of society was standardized to serve the state. This brought order, but at an unbearable cost. The populace was subjected to staggering demands of heavy taxation and relentless corvée labor. Millions were conscripted to build the Great Wall, construct an immense network of roads and canals, and erect the emperor's colossal tomb, the very resting place guarded by the terracotta army. These were not voluntary efforts but mandatory levies, exhausting the newly unified people. Local customs were stifled, intellectual discourse suppressed, and constant surveillance, coupled with unforgiving punishments for even minor infractions, fostered widespread resentment rather than loyalty. The system's inherent weakness was laid bare upon the death of Qin Shi Huang in 210 BCE. The carefully constructed edifice, reliant entirely on the iron will of a singular, powerful ruler, fractured immediately. A desperate power struggle among his advisors, notably Li Si and Zhao Gao, plunged the court into chaos. With the central authority compromised, the unbearable burdens on the populace reached a breaking point. In 209 BCE, a humble group of conscripted peasants, led by Chen Shang and Wu Guang, facing execution for merely being delayed by floods, launched the Day's Village Uprising. Their cry, "Princes and generals are made of no special stuff," resonated across the land, igniting a cascade of revolts. The legalist philosophy, which viewed human nature as inherently selfish and needing strict control, neglected the fundamental need for a moral or consensual basis for governance. Fear alone proved insufficient to sustain an empire. It had instead cultivated a seething animosity that, once unleashed, could not be contained. The very ruthlessness that had forged China's first empire had, ironically, sown the seeds of its destruction. The Qin dynasty, born from legalist principles, vanished rapidly from history a mere 15 years after unifying China. Yet, its impact stretched across 2 millennia, forever shaping the trajectory of the Chinese state. This is the profound paradox of legalism's legacy. Officially condemned and vilified by subsequent dynasties, its structural innovations became utterly indispensable, providing the very scaffolding upon which a unified China would continuously rebuild itself. The commandery, prefecture system, the centralized bureaucratic apparatus, the unified currency, weights, measures, and written script, these bedrock components of the imperial state were Qin innovations, products of legalist efficiency. They were adopted, refined, and maintained by every major dynasty thereafter, from the Han to the Qing. While successive rulers, most notably the Han emperors, publicly championed Confucianism as the moral and ethical foundation of governance, beneath this Confucian facade often lay a pragmatic, legalist core of administrative control and authoritarian enforcement. The very notion of all under heaven, Tian Sha, as a single, unified entity, governed by a solitary emperor, was cemented by Qin's ruthless application of legalism, becoming an enduring cultural and political aspiration for millennia. The physical testaments to Qin's ambition, segments of the Great Wall, the vast road networks, and ambitious canal projects, also stand as a testament to the unparalleled capacity for centralized planning and mass labor mobilization that legalism afforded. However, this transformative efficiency came at a steep price. Legalism serves as a stark historical warning about the perils of unchecked state power, the dangers of harsh, impersonal laws, and the suffocating suppression of intellectual freedom. The Qin's swift collapse, triggered by popular revolt against its unbearable demands, underscored the limitations of governance by fear alone. While historical analogies must always be drawn with caution, the enduring appeal of pure pragmatism, of harnessing all societal resources for state strength and specific objectives, can be seen in various forms throughout history, even into modern times. It compels us to reflect upon the trade-offs inherent in any system of governance. What, then, is the ultimate cost of an empire forged through such uncompromising efficiency? What does it mean for a society when stability and order are prioritized above all else, and individual liberties become merely variables in the grand calculus of state power? If you found this exploration illuminating, remember to subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the epic pages of history.
History is full of secrets. Tap subscribe and explore more with the History Atlas.